Hey everybody, it is Dak here from the Ed Boys, and welcome to my Venenatis and Spindel guide. The three big wildy bosses, Venenatis, Callisto, and Vedian, all got a little bit of a rework, including some weaker single combat versions of the boss, which is why we have both Venenatis and Spindel covered in this guide. They're both pretty much the same fight, but there are some differences that we will be discussing as we get into it. This is going to be the full guide for these two bosses. If you're looking for more information or some more example fights than I give in this guide, then I will be uploading 2 different full hours of fighting these bosses that will be linked in the description. In this guide, I'm going to go over the recommended stats and other requirements for fighting the spiders. Afterwards, we'll discuss the potential gear and inventory setup that you can bring in the wilderness with you. We'll then talk about how to travel to each of the spiders before how to actually fight them. And then once we talk about fighting the bosses, we'll briefly go over some tips to try to avoid PKers, and finally go over the loot that you can get from the bosses. Wilderness bosses are a members-only boss. Other than that, there's no actual requirements for fighting these bosses, so I guess it's really just all recommendations in this section. The spiders are weak to crush, so you should be using melee here. Technically, you can range them, but this will not be a range guide. I suggest having 70+ attack, strength, and defense minimum when you're trying to grind out drops for these bosses. If you're only looking for the single kill for your elite diary, you can go in there with lower stats, maybe like 60+, and you can just kill Spindel one time for the diary. Having 80+ in your melee stats is going to be a nice boost for actually grinding out Spindel, and if you're specifically going for Venenatis instead, I would suggest like 90+ in those melee stats. Very simply, the higher your stats, the better. You're going to want to have Protect from melee, which requires 43 prayer, but getting up to 70 prayer and then unlocking Piety is going to make a huge difference in your kills per hour. And completing Monkey Madness 2 and getting the Royal Seed Pod is pretty huge for wilderness bossing, or really any activities in the wilderness. It is a one-click teleport that works up to level 30 wilderness, which is very convenient for banking and escaping PKers. Dragonstone Jewelry can also teleport from level 30 wilderness, like an Amulet of Glory, but they're not a one-click teleport, and if you lose your Royal Seed Pod, it only costs 2 GP to get another one back from King Narnode. Again, it's not a requirement, but it's very nice to have Monkey Madness 2 done and get these Royal Seed Pods. Let's move on to the gear section of the guide. It's a little bit more complicated picking a gear set for the wilderness bosses, since you don't want to bring a lot of risk into the wilderness. I'm going to go over each gear slot, and at the end of this section, show you the risk of my general setup for Venenatis. If you aren't skulled when you die, then you'll always keep your 3 most expensive items. If you go into your in-game settings, you can turn on skull prevention, which makes it impossible for you to accidentally get skulled by attacking another player. You also have the protect item prayer, which gives you up to 4 safe items, but you could get smited and lose that 4th item, so keep that in mind when you're setting up for the boss. 3 expensive items, and then only things that you're willing to risk after that. Real quick, we can talk about the Traveler Parchment. This is a reward from Last Man Standing, and it drops from monsters in the Wilderness Slayer Cave. It's also tradable and currently sits at about 630k. It was like a mil a couple of months ago, so the price does fluctuate a little bit. If you take one of these to Purdue, who resides in this tower of the Lumbridge Castle, he will lock an untradeable item for you. This process also costs an additional 500k, so no matter the price of the Traveler Parchment, you do have to spend money locking the item. If you lose a locked item in the Wilderness, it'll just lose the locked status and you'll keep the item instead, but then you have to relock it with the Traveler Parchment to keep it safe again. This is helpful for taking some higher DPS items without actually losing them when you get PK'd, but overall it is still expensive, so I really don't use any of them, to be honest. There is a list of lockable items linked in the description. I'm going to go over each gear slot here and show some of the best options and which options I'm wearing, and then all the way down to the minimum options you could bring with you. Let's go ahead and start with the head slot. If you have a spider task, then you should wear a Slayer helmet, and that would likely be one of your 3 expensive items that you're not risking. The Torva full helm is best in slot outside of the on-task Slayer helm, and it is good enough to consider using as one of your 3 non-risk items. I prefer to just use the helm of Nadasnot when I'm not on task. From there, a Berserker helm or a Dwarven helm can get the job done. In the cape slot, the Infernal Cape is best in slot, and the Fire Cape is a solid option, but only if you're planning on locking these items with the Traveler Parchment, which could still be pricey since you have to relock them. So I personally just stick to the Myth's Cape, which is very little risk and a solid option for crush bonus. The Myth's Cape does require Dragon Slayer 2, which is a hefty add-on, so after that I would go with your best Ardoin Cloak for some prayer bonus, or potentially a Legends Cape for a little bit of defense bonus. For your necklace, the Amulet of Strength is actually a very solid option. It's pretty cheap to replace, and it gives the same strength bonus as an Amulet of Torture. The Torture also gives plus 15 crush bonus, which is pretty nice for accuracy, so I often opt for the Amulet of Torture as one of my non-risk items, but the Amulet of Strength is a very nice option. Outside of that, I would go with the Amulet of Glory, and then maybe an Unholy Symbol for some prayer bonus, and there's a plus 2 crush bonus on that Unholy Symbol as well. In your ammo slot, you should go for a Blessing. The Rada's Blessing 4 has a +2 prayer bonus, while every other blessing in the game has +1, but at least the Rada's Blessings 1 through 3 are also free to get back, so is the Rada's Blessing 4, but if you have a Rada's Blessing in general, I would use that, because they're free to get back. In your weapon slot, you want to go for a Crush-style weapon, since the spiders are weak to Crush. The Ursine Chain Mace is a Crush weapon that gives a +50% boost in accuracy and damage if you're using it on NPCs in the wilderness, and you do have to charge it with Revenant Ether to get that boost. It also has a special attack that does damage over time if it hits, and if you hit a PKer with a spec, they won't be able to run for 6 ticks, which means you could hit a PKer and maybe get away from them with it. The Vigora's Chain Mace is a little bit weaker than the Ursine Chain Mace, and it doesn't have that special attack, but it is still an insane weapon against these spiders. The upgrade to the Ursine Chain Mace is not very expensive, and it is definitely worth it. So unless you're an Iron Man who hasn't been able to get that drop, I highly suggest just going for the Ursine Chain Mace. You do not need to use one of the Chain Maces to get good kills at the spiders, though. The Abyssal Bludgeon is a very solid Crush weapon. It's a little bit more expensive than a Chain Mace, but for Iron Men who don't want to get the drop from Revenants, it's still a great option. Technically, the Inquisitor's Chain Mace is a little bit better than the Abyssal Bludgeon, but it's a whole lot more expensive and not very easy to get overall. The Zamihasta on Crush is a solid option, and after that you can still go Sarachnis Cudgel, Leaf-Bladed Battle Axe. Even the Dragon Mace is still going to get you some kills. Just the same with like having higher stats. Having a better weapon and better gear is just going to make for faster kills, but having minimal gear, you can still squeeze out some kills from Spindel. He's really not that strong. If you plan on fighting mostly Venenatis instead of Spindel, you probably want to stick to just the Chain Maces. The Bludgeon wouldn't be too bad, and the Zamihasta could get it done, but Venenatis is a little bit more thick than Spindel. If you are using a one-handed weapon, then you do need a shield. The Avernic Defender is best in slot, and the Dragon Defender is also a very solid option for doing good damage. You can use the Trauver Parchment to lock these items, but I prefer to just have my Defender as one of my non-risked items and not waste the 500k anytime that I have to relock them. The Dragonfire Ward is a solid option for strength bonus, but also not an item that you really want to risk. The Book of War is very easy to get a lot of once you unlock it after completing the Horror from the Deep quest. This book requires Bandos pages to complete, making it very cheap to get the first one, and then it has +5 prayer bonus and +2 strength, which is really not that bad. For the chest and legs slot, I would go with Black Dragonhide Armor. It has solid magic defense, which makes it more difficult for PKers to freeze you, and it's very cheap to get more if you do get PK'd. After that, I would go with Proselyte Armor for the prayer bonus. Initiate Armor is a weaker version of Proselyte, and then Monk's Robes are very cheap, and they can just be picked up from the Edgeville Monastery, making them pretty much 0 risk, and they still give you some prayer bonus. In the glove slot, I often go with Rune Gloves for less risk, but if I'm seeing less PKers that night, or maybe I've had a few solid drops in a row, I really don't mind going up to Barrow's Gloves and risking a little bit more for some better DPS. In general, I just go with the best RFD gloves that I'm willing to risk. The lowest I've gone is Mithril Gloves on my Iron Man, which still gives a decent bonus. Also, when I'm using the Amulet of Strength on my Iron Man, I tend to find that I can just bring Barrow's Gloves, and that's one of my top 3 items that I'm not risking, and I still have pretty solid DPS. I treat that boot slot similar to the glove slot. I usually start the day on like rune boots, and then if I'm not getting PK'd very much, or I made a lot of money on the day already, I'll bump it up to dragon boots and risk it a little bit more. If you're not going for either of those, climbing boots is a very solid option for some strength bonus. They're very cheap, and you can get like 20 pairs of them for 1 last man standing point, so they're very simple to stack up a bunch of them. Finally, in the ring slot, I bring the Imbued Berserker Ring. It's very nice, giving you 8 strength, a very solid boost for your max hit. The Lightbearer is not a bad option if you plan on bringing a Dragon Warhammer, but that takes up 2 of your 3 expensive items right there, and I usually don't bother with the Dragon Warhammer, especially if I'm using a Chain Mace. The Tyrannical Ring is not bad for some crush bonus. You should definitely imbue the ring to double its stats, and then worst case scenario would be a Ring of Wealth, but honestly, that just adds unnecessary risk for like pretty much 0 benefit, so I wouldn't even bother with that. Let's go ahead and take a look at the risk that I have here. As you can see, my 4 expensive items would be the Chain Mace, the Torture, the Avernic, and the Berserker Ring. If I do get smited or just manage to not have my Protect item enabled when I die, I will also lose this Berserker Ring currently, but I'm very aware of that risk. I've spent a lot of time out in the wildy with the Berserker Ring risk at times, and I have lost 1 of them so far. I'll try not to lose another ever again, but if you're not trying to have a bit of risk for your Protect item, then you could also switch out the Amulet of Torture with an Amulet of Strength, and that way your 4th item here would be that Helm of Nadesnot is what you are trying to use Protect item for. Also, if you want to upgrade to the Rune Boots and the Dragon Boots, you see that this gives a little bit more risk. Again, this is if I protect my Berserker Ring, but even if I successfully protect my Berserker Ring, if I lose the Dragon Boots and the Barrow's Gloves, it's still like 400k risk. It's decent risk, a little bit on the higher end in general, but Venenatis pays out very well, so I personally don't mind risking too much. And if you don't want to be risking as much money, then you just need to make sure not to bring as expensive stuff out there. As long as you are aware of your risk and you know that like you're willing to lose that stuff that you're bringing with you, then you should be good to go. So that risk does include the potions and whatnot that is in my inventory, so let's take a look at the inventory setup. First of all, a Divine Super Combat Potion to keep yourself at max DPS the whole time. I do bring some darts with me to KO the spiderlings that Venenatis will spawn. I usually bring steel darts, but you only need to hit a 5, so bronze darts could get the job done depending on your range level. Just bring some cheap darts with you. We're already jumping to the bottom of the inventory where I have my looting bag to help with some inventory space. You can put loot in the looting bag while you're out in the wilderness, up to 28 Invy spaces, but you can only remove those items at the bank, and then anything that's in your looting bag when you get killed will be dropped on the ground. So if you get a very expensive drop, you don't want to put that in your looting bag. Obtaining a looting bag is very easy. They are dropped by wilderness monsters. You can only have one at a time, so you can't really stack up on a bunch of them by getting them as drops. But if you just lost your looting bag, then you could just go out there without one, and you likely will get one from Venenatis very quickly. Also, there is a looting bag note. This is a reward from Last Man Standing. It's also a tradable item and stackable in the bank. So you can buy this looting bag note, like buy a bunch of them. And if you don't have a looting bag, you can use one of these on any banker in the game, and it'll give you a looting bag. So technically, you can stack up on looting bags, and it's very easy to get a bunch of them. I've got my Royal Seed Pod for teleporting away from the fight, and then an Anacarl teleport for teleporting to Venenatis' lair. I will admit for Spindel, I rarely bring the teleport out with me and tend to just walk there. A stamina potion is needed since there's a lot of running and even a mechanic that will drain your run energy a little bit. The more spider kills that you get, the less stamina you're going to need, but it is helpful for also avoiding PKers, so don't forget a stamina potion. I also have 2 Ceradomin Brews for helping surviving the PKers, and then the rest of it is Blighted Anglerfish and Blighted Super Restores. The Blighted versions of these supplies can be obtained from LMS, but also as dropped from these bosses out here. They work the same as regular Anglerfish and regular Super Restores, but you can only use them in the wilderness. There's also Blighted Manta Rays and Carom ones that can be pretty helpful, but I like to use the Anglerfish. The ratio of food and potions will change depending on like your stats and your gear, and just in general from Invy to Invy you might have to adjust your potions a little bit, but that's the general look of my inventory when I'm headed out to Venenatis or Spindel. I did mention once during the gear section that you can bring a Dragon Warhammer to lower the spider's defense a little bit and help out the speed of kills. This is definitely not needed on Spindel, but it can be a little bit more helpful when fighting Venenatis. I don't really think it's worth bringing the Warhammer as one of your like non-risk expensive items, unless maybe you're in a team setting and only like 1 or 2 players is bringing the Warhammer. Let's go ahead and talk about how to travel to the bosses. They are located in different lairs, though they're not super far away from each other. We'll go ahead and start with Spindel. Spindel is located in the Web Chasm, just north of the Ferox Enclave. It's not a very far walk from the Enclave, so I usually just dueling ring to the Enclave and bank from there. The Corp lair is a little bit closer, so you can use a Games Necklace to teleport out there. It only takes up 1 more Invy spot, but also doesn't save that much time. Venenatis is a little bit further away from the Enclave than Spindel is, but it's still a viable option to just run out there from the Enclave if you have no other options. The fastest teleport out there is the Wilderness Crab teleport, which costs 1 LMS point, but it's also tradable for currently 33k. 33k for 1 teleport is a bit hefty, so I avoid that one myself. The Anacarl teleport is pretty solid, and you can buy the tab for very cheap. Even the Games Necklace to Corpse Lair, like with Spindel, can save a little bit of time for your travels, but also takes up that Invy space. Let's quickly talk about the fee to enter the cave and then the escape caves when you're exiting Venenatis. For entering either Spindel or Venenatis' room, you do need to pay 50k cash. This can be taken directly from your bank. You can also right-click and peek into either of their caves to see if anybody's already in the cave, but you will need 20k C to be able to do this. You will not have to repay this 50k fee every time you enter the cave. You only have to repay this fee when you die in the wilderness. Also, each time you kill the boss, it'll reduce your next fee by 10k. So if you get at least 5 kills on the boss between dying, you really don't pay the fee very often. In fact, once you get really into this grind of the wildy bosses in general, you start to forget that this fee even exists in the first place. So when you leave Spindel's cave, you're going to be at the exact same cave entrance that you first entered Spindel, but when you leave Venenatis' cave, you go through the escape cave system, which sounds a lot more complicated than it is. Callisto, Vedian, and Venenatis all share a cave system when you exit their lair. When you leave Venenatis' lair, you're placed at like a random exit within the escape caves, though any PKers that are following you will also be placed at the same exit, and you still just have to run out of the cave, try to get to like level 30 wildy, and hopefully teleport out to freedom. Let's go ahead and talk about the actual fight. I'm going to go over the mechanics for Venenatis, and then I'll show you the fight for Spindel, which you will see they are pretty much the same. Venenatis uses all 3 attack styles, melee, magic, and range, but they are predictable. Anytime that you're standing next to Venenatis, if you're within melee range, no matter what, it will use melee. Other than that, she's always using a rotation of range and magic attacks. She's going to start with range attacks. Every 4 attacks, she moves to a different spot in the room, and every other time that she moves, she will switch attack styles. In other words, every 8 attacks, she will switch from range to magic or magic to range, and the fight, she will always start with range. This doesn't really matter much when you're using melee since you're just standing close and protecting from melee, but understanding when she's using a range or magic attack can also be helpful for those special attacks. She has 2 special attacks. First, she's going to spawn some spiderlings. The more people in the room, the more spiderlings that will spawn. If you're soloing Venenatis or any Spindel kill at all, she's always just going to spawn 2 of them at a time. These spiderlings do drain your prayer when they attack you, and while the spiders are out in the arena, Venenatis can hit through your prayer. The more spiderlings that are spawned, the more damage she can do through prayer, so it is very worth KOing these spiderlings, and that's what I bring the darts for. Even just hitting them with your melee weapon is not a bad option, unless maybe you're using the chain maces, which means you're wasting some Revenant Ether, and overall the darts are going to be a little bit faster, so you get less prayer drained, and you do take less damage during the fight. The other special attack is the sticky webs. She will shoot out sticky webs right where the player is standing, creating a 7x5 area that you do not want to stand on. If you do stand in this area, you're going to take damage, have your prayer drained, and have your run drained pretty quickly, so it's highly suggested to stay away from the webs. They are very predictable though, so you can run over to the corner of the room as she's about to use the attack, and generally stick the webs pretty much out of the way. Let's talk about when she actually uses these special attacks. Every 4 attacks, she moves, and every other time that she moves, she's using a special attack. This is the same exact pattern when she's switching her attack style. Every other time that she moves, she'll switch from range to magic, or magic to range, and she'll also use a special attack in that next rotation. Of course, remember, if you've been standing close to her the whole time, you don't see any of these range or magic attacks, but you could step away and tank one to kind of get an idea of where you are in the rotation. So she will start the fight using range. She's going to spawn in some spiderlings. After 4 attacks, she will move, continue to use range, no special attacks. After 4 more attacks, she'll move again. Now she has switched to magic, and she's going to use that sticky web. The thing about the sticky web is she always uses it on the 3rd magic attack. So when she moves and she switches to magic, you need to wait for her to hit you twice, then run away to the corner and protect from magic. She should then use a magic attack and the sticky web at the same time. And then after 1 more attack, she's going to move. No special attack. 4 attacks later, she moves, uses the spiderlings. 4 attacks later, she moves without a spec. 4 attacks later, she'll move, and then the sticky webs will happen on that 3rd attack after moving. Let's go ahead and look at a full kill of all these mechanics so that you can get an idea of how it all flows. I am going to do this with the Spindel fight to show you how the mechanics are the same. The only difference is like the size of the sticky webs that lands on the ground. You run into the Spindel cave, as long as you're just starting at the very beginning of the fight. It wasn't like mid-fight and somebody left it. Her first attack is going to spawn some spiderlings, as you can see here. Put on those steel darts, knock out those spiderlings, and go back to using my bludgeon. In general, I don't have to pay much attention to like chasing her down. My character's just going to follow her around. That's the first time she has moved. There's going to be no special attack or anything right here. I still kind of ran over to the side for a second as if I was like being safe that she might use sticky webs. But now that she has moved a second time, on her 3rd attack, she'll sticky web. So this is her 2nd attack. And then right here, we're going to get melee attack and some sticky webs. I probably could have ran a little bit further, but kind of cornered that one so that we don't have to deal with those sticky webs very much. She just moved. No special attack is going to happen because it's every other time she moves. So when she moves here, the attack immediately after, she should be spawning some spiderlings. And there they are. They're coming in from the north. And it's really, this is the same rotation. Like, it may seem complicated at first when you're like, every 4 attacks she moves, every other time that she moves, there's a spec. But, like, she's moving here. She's not going to do any special attacks. And then the next time she moves, it'll be on her 3rd attack that she uses these sticky webs. So she should move on this attack. We're running across the room. She attacks once there. A 2nd time here. And then there's the sticky webs. Very easy. So it's pretty simple rotation, and you don't even have to like really count it out very often because you don't have to have that much reaction time for the spiderlings. If you're paying no attention to the fact that they are going to spawn the next time she moves, but let's say you're just kind of, I don't know, you're chilling, not paying enough attention. Like, it's not that big of a deal. You just suddenly fighting here like, oh, there's the spiderlings. They're pretty obviously there suddenly. You go ahead and attack them, maybe misclick, get yourself hit by a range attack coming in hot. But then with the sticky webs, if you were paying attention to the sticky webs already on the ground, they just disappeared as like she was moving there, and it's always like one more movement after that you're going to get more sticky webs. So you really just start to get into a flow of it. And that really is the case for both Spindel and Venenatis. Like, it's just a pretty simple fight. You do have to, like, pay attention, I guess, but it's really not that difficult. So we have talked a lot about how to fight the two bosses. Let's go ahead and discuss which of the two bosses you should kill. Venenatis is in multi-combat, so if you're trying to kill the spider in a team setting, you obviously have to do Venenatis. If you're looking to solo the boss, I do suggest sticking to Spindel for the most part. It is pretty easy to kill, and then easier to escape PKers since it's low-level wilderness, and you won't get attacked by a team since it's not multi-combat. And then the loot is still very solid overall. If you have an Ursine Chain Mace or the Vigora's Chain Mace, then you're rocking like 80 plus attack and strength and whatnot. You could definitely solo Venenatis. I would say 90 plus attack and strength might be a little bit nicer there, but you can try out some solo Venenatis if you have those chain maces. It's also worth noting the botting epidemic. There are a ton of bots out in the wildy bosses, and Spindel gets affected by that a lot more than Venenatis. So if you have a hard time finding an open Spindel world, there's likely a lot of open Venenatis worlds. Overall, Spindel is less risk and less reward, but you can get kills very quickly, so it's not that much less GP an hour. It is still worth grinding out some Spindel gains. Before we break down the loot a little bit more, let's talk about the PKers situation. I'm going to keep this section fairly brief because all of these points could be made for any of the wildy boss guides that I'm doing, and I don't want to repeat a ton of information in all of these guides, adding like 10 plus minutes to every video. I will be making a video on just escaping PKers and the topic of avoiding them after I finish these wildy boss guides, and that video will be linked in the description once it is uploaded. In general, the largest piece of advice that I can give about PKers is just don't bring that much risk into the wilderness, and then try to put as little mental effort into those PKers as possible. There are things you can do to avoid PKers and escape PKers once they have arrived, but if you're really trying to get a lot of boss kills out of the wilderness, then you're gonna get killed by PKers eventually. Sometimes you get PK'd a bunch of times in a short period of time, and sometimes you'll go hours without seeing PKers. It does actually happen. No matter what though, of all the things that I have found that helped me with the PKing aspect of wildy bosses, is just not really caring about those PKers. Don't risk that much money, and then if they do PK you, you got to get back out to the boss as fast as possible so that you can actually get some kills, waste less time, and make the money back. That all being said, it's always better to escape the PKers than it is to lose whatever you're risking. So if you're unable to Royal Seed Pod out of the way, you still don't have to give up. Accepting the fact that you might get PK'd sometimes is not the same as just letting them PK you. Chug those brews and restores, focus on the PKer's attack style so that you're always protecting from the right attacks using that right overhead prayer. And if you have been teleblocked, you can still get far enough away from a PKer that you can log out once you're out of combat long enough. Use the trees out in the wilderness, maybe even the caves of those bosses that you're fighting, going in and out of the cave to try to juke those PKers out. You will be surprised how many PKers are not that successful at taking your loot. Like I said, this conversation actually has a lot of layers to it, so I do want to make a full discussion video about avoiding PKers, and I will be linking that video in the description once I have finished it up. If you have any questions about avoiding PKers currently though, let me know in the comment section below, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Let's finally get into the best part of the bossing life, the loot. Each of these bosses has a very similar drop table. They each drop all the same regular items. Spindel drops like a rune 2-hand, while Venenatis gives rune darts, and then Spindel doesn't drop a variety of herbs. You can only drop snapdragons. For the most part, it's really all the same drops, but Spindel just drops less of them. It's worth noting that each player gets their own loot when you fight Venenatis, so in a team of 2, you'll get your own drop. Depending on how much damage you did to the boss, you'll get a certain quantity of that drop. You can't get 2 uniques in one drop from Venenatis though, so if somebody gets like a dragon pickaxe or like the Voidwaker gem, only one player can get that during a full Venenatis kill. It's not like both players can pull a unique at the same time. A large part of this GP is the Voidwaker gem. The Voidwaker gem is 63 mil at the moment, or at the time of making the script for this video at least. The odds of getting a Voidwaker piece are 1 in 360 from Venenatis, but 1 in 912 from Spindel. According to the OSRS wiki, the average Spindel kill is about 116k, and the average Venenatis kill is about 321k. In other words, the Voidwaker gem is a larger percentage of Spindel's profit, but either way, you're making a little bit more than half of your money purely based off of those Voidwaker gem drops. Even without receiving a Voidwaker piece, though, you still get a lot of good cash with some of the other big regular drops like Snapdragons and Onyx Bolt Tips and Red Spider's Eggs. Even some of the drops that aren't as expensive like the runes and whatnot, they do add up pretty easily. You can obviously manage more kills per hour when you're fighting Venenatis than you can when fighting Spindel, but with Venenatis Venenatis' loot being so much more expensive, how much money per hour are we looking at with each? Spindle kills are fairly quick, even though it has a lot of health. If you're rocking an Ursine Chain Mace and max stats, and then you're not seeing any PKers, you can get like 40 to 45 Spindle kills an hour. But with minimum gear and stats, it's as low as like 15 to 20. If we then include how packed the worlds are at the moment, sometimes finding an open world can even shrink those kills down a little bit. If you get PK'd all the time, you could also see even less, but like the amount of PKers and packed worlds per hour, that's really all going to vary a lot. So 15 to 45 Spindles at 116k per kill would be 1.7 mil to 5.2 mil in loot per hour. With Venenatis, we're looking at more like 20 to 25 kills at max pace, maybe as low as 10 per hour with minimum gear if things aren't going as well. 10 to 25 kills an hour is 3.2 to 8.1 mil GP an hour in loot. Basically saying if you're doing 25 kills an hour consistently at Venenatis and you're getting the Voidwaker gem on pace, you're banking up to 8 mil in loot an hour. Once you subtract supplies, the time lost when you see PKers, plus the money loss if you do get PK'd, it's really not easy to make 8 mil an hour. It's not quite where it actually peaks at profit. But overall, even if you're doing 20 kills an hour, you're getting a Voidwaker gem every 12 hours at that rate. That's still banking 5 mil in loot only from those Voidwaker gems. In general, I have done a lot of kills on each of the wildy bosses, and they pay out very well even when you're not getting the uniques, but since one of the uniques here happens to be an extra 60 mil payday, this can be a lot of money. You can also get the Venenatis pet from either of these bosses. It's a 1 in 2,000 to get it from Venenatis, and it's a 1 in 2,800 to get it from Spindle. It's so much faster to kill Spindle while not being that much more rare to get the pet that if you're purely here for the spider pet, you should definitely stick to Spindle kills. I think that's everything I wanted to talk about when it comes to the spider guide, everyone. If you still have any questions about how to fight Venenatis or Spindle, let me know in the comments section below. I will be uploading an hour of Venenatis and an hour of Spindle video to give even more like full example kills in the fight. So if you're looking for more examples, those will be linked in the description. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. If you enjoyed or just got some useful information, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. I do stream on Twitch, which should be linked on the screen and in the description. I also have a Twitter, which should be linked in the description, and a Discord, also linked. Thank you very much for watching, and best of luck on your spider grinds.